right, so get this. We're going to do a deep dive today on something I think a lot of people are curious about, the ketogenic diet. You know, keto, everyone's talking about it. And you guys sent in this video from Thomas DeLauer. He's like a fitness expert right there. And he really breaks down the science behind it. I got to say, pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's a hot topic. And I think it's important, like right off the bat, to kind of separate, the myth from reality. Because people use low carb and keto, like they're the same thing, but DeLauer makes it super clear. They're not.
So it's not as simple as just cutting out bread, huh?
Right. It's not just about ditching carbs. Like, think of it this way. Low carb is like a dimmer switch. You can adjust it. Keto is like a light switch. It's either on or off. You're either in ketosis or you're not.
Okay, so then what exactly makes that switch flip? What's the science behind actually getting into ketosis?
Okay, so basically when you like really cut back on carbs, like way back, your body's got to find a different source of fuel, right?
Makes sense. Got to keep the lights on somehow.
Exactly. So it turns to fat, starts breaking down stored fat for energy, and then your liver, it starts producing these things called ketones.
Ketones, now that rings a bell. Isn't that what, like, helped our ancestors survive famines and stuff?
Totally. It was like their survival mechanism. And DeLauer really emphasizes how efficient fat is as an energy source compared to carbs. We're talking 9 calories per gram for fat versus only 4 for carbs. Big difference.
Huh. So not all calories are created equal, it seems. So instead of relying on those carbs that burn up quickly, our bodies can use fat as this long-lasting energy reserve. Maybe that's why people on keto say they feel fuller longer and don't get those energy crashes as much.
That's exactly it. And it goes even further than that. DeLauer makes this really cool point about keto's effect on, get this, brain function.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, right. So there's this specific ketone, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and apparently it can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. And it provides more energy per unit of oxygen than glucose does.
Hold on, so you're saying our brains might actually work better on ketones than on sugar? That's pretty wild.
I know, right? DeLauer even mentions this study from 2004. They found ketosis had a positive effect on how genes were expressed in parts of the brain related to, like, memory and focus.
Interesting. So maybe there's something to this whole keto brain boost thing people talk about.
Yeah, definitely some food for thought. Now, one study doesn't prove everything, but it's a pretty cool glimpse into the potential. Right.
Totally. I can see why this would be a big deal for anyone looking to, sharpen their thinking, whether it's for work or just you get older, staying sharp. But what about athletes? DeLauer mentioned keto being good for some athletes and bad for others. How does that work?
It all comes down to what kind of energy your activity needs. Think about a sprinter. Someone needs to go all out for a short burst. Their muscles mainly use glucose to make ATP. That's what gives cells their energy.
So for like sprinting to catch the bus or lifting something heavy, glucose is still the best.
Exactly. But for things like marathons or like if you're going on a long hike, your body needs a different kind of fuel, something that lasts longer.
Yeah.
And that's where fat comes in. It's a process called fat oxidation. Our bodies can use fat to keep going for those longer stretches.
Ah, so that's where keto fits in. You're training your body to be a fat-burning machine so you can, go the distance.
That's a great way to put it. It's kind of like switching from a gas guzzler car to one that runs on, electricity that can go for miles and miles.
That's a perfect analogy. And that explains why it might not be good for every athlete, right? If your sport needs you to have that sudden burst of energy relying on glucose, then keto could actually make you worse.
Exactly. You wouldn't want to try to run a sprint with an empty tank. So keto isn't like a magic solution for every athlete. It depends on what you're trying to do. But let's be real, a lot of people looking into keto probably want to know about weight loss.
That's got to be the number one reason, right? But DeLauer had this whole thing about a water weight trap. Kind of sounds scary. What's that all about?
So here's the thing. When we eat carbs, they bind with water in our bodies. Like for every gram of carbs we store, we hold on to about 3.7 grams of water. So when you first cut out carbs on keto, you lose a bunch of water weight, which can make it seem like you're losing fat really fast.
So that initial drop on the scale might not be the fat melting away like we'd hope.
Right. It's mostly water weight going down, real fat loss. That takes longer and you got to stick with it. But hey, seeing that initial change on the scale can be a good motivator, right?
It's like a little win to keep you going.
Yeah.
But then DeLauer mentioned something called the keto flu, which doesn't sound fun at all. Is that something everyone gets, and how bad is it, really?
This is where it gets interesting. DeLauer says there's a big difference between actually being in ketosis and just being low carb.
Yeah.
He thinks the keto flu happens when people are kind of stuck in between their bodies starting to change, but they haven't fully switched to using fat for fuel.
So, like, their body's confused and rebelling. Not a fun time.
Yeah, it's like being in this weird metabolic no man's land. That's why DeLauer says you got to pick a lane. Either go all in on keto or don't so you can avoid that rough transition.
Okay, so no half measures with keto. Kind of like jumping into a cold pool.
Yeah.
You dive in or stay out, right?
Yeah.
No toe dipping.
Exactly. And it shows how important it is to really understand what you're getting into before you start. You know, listening to DeLauer, it really hits you that keto isn't just about the physical stuff. He talks about like the mental and emotional side too, which I think is super important.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's not just about dropping pounds or being able to run farther. Changing how you eat that much can really mess with your head, right?
No doubt. It takes serious willpower. And all those changes with your energy and even your mood, it can definitely affect how you feel overall.
Totally. It's like a whole lifestyle change, not just a diet. But DeLauer doesn't really get into that psychological stuff too much in this video, right? Still something to think about, though.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a whole body thing, you know? But since we are talking about the physical side, we talked about losing weight and athletes, but what about just like overall health? Are there benefits or risks beyond those that we should be thinking about?
That's a great question. I'm curious what DeLauer has to say about that. Does he think keto helps with any specific health problems?
Well, there's definitely research going on about that. For example, some studies are showing that keto might be good for people with type 2 diabetes, helping them control their blood sugar better.
Wow. Seriously? So keto could actually be like a treatment for diabetes.
It's looking promising, but of course we need more research to be sure about the long-term effects. And there's even research that suggests it might help with seizures in people with epilepsy.
That's incredible. Just changing what you eat could have such a big impact on these conditions. But I guess it's not a cure-all, right?
No, exactly. Important to remember that. It's more like a tool, not magic. But it is a tool that's showing potential, you know? Though, like I said, more research is always needed. And if you're thinking about trying keto because of a medical condition, you absolutely got to talk to a doctor first.
Sure, don't try to be your own doctor. So we talked about the good stuff, but are there any downsides to keto that DeLauer talks about, besides that keto flu thing we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah. There are definitely things to keep in mind. One thing is, you know, you could end up not getting enough of certain nutrients. When you cut out whole food groups like fruits and grains and some veggies, you might be missing out on important vitamins and minerals.
That makes sense. It's like trying to build a house, but you only have half the materials, right? Might not turn out so well.
Exactly. DeLauer doesn't really talk about this in the video, but it's definitely something to think about, especially if you're planning on doing keto for a long time. Talking to a doctor or a registered dietitian can help you make sure you're getting everything you need.
Yeah, they can help you make a keto plan that's balanced and right for you. What else should people watch out for?
Another thing some people have trouble with is digestion problems. Like some get constipated or have diarrhea when they first start keto.
Ugh, that doesn't sound fun at all. Is that just a temporary thing, or does it stick around?
It usually goes away, but yeah, it can be a pain. Again, this isn't something DeLauer specifically mentions, but it's worth knowing.
Yeah, I guess he's focusing on the positive side of keto. But it's good to know both sides of the story, right? Got to be realistic.
For sure, especially when you're making big changes to how you live. So putting it all together, who do you think would be a good fit for keto and who should maybe stay away?
Well, going back to what DeLauer said about how active you are, it seems like those high-intensity athletes, the ones who need those bursts of energy, probably wouldn't do well on keto.
Right. Our sprinter friend trying to catch the bus would probably find it harder, not easier, to do that on keto.
It's exactly. But for endurance athletes or people who aren't that active, keto might be worth a shot, as long as they're aware of those potential downsides and try to prevent them.
Totally. And even then, it's not a guarantee you'll lose weight or get any other benefit. You got to put in the work, be consistent, and be ready to change your whole way of eating.
So what about our listener who's been listening to all this? What are the key takeaways? What should they be thinking about?
Well, I think the most important thing is to realize that keto is complicated. There are potential benefits, but there are also risks. It's not something to just jump into without thinking.
So it's about really doing your research, thinking about your goals, and understanding what it's really all about.
Exactly. You got to know what you need, what you want, and talk to a doctor to make sure you're making good choices.
Great advice. We've covered so much today, but it feels like we've only scratched the surface. There's always more to learn, especially about something as complicated as nutrition, right?
Definitely. Luckily, we have one more part to this deep dive, so we can wrap things up and maybe explore some other interesting aspects of the ketogenic diet.
Sounds good to me. Let's take a quick break and come back ready to finish our keto exploration with some final thoughts. All right, we're back, ready to finish up our keto deep dive. We've gone through a lot, from the science to the pros and cons. Definitely been an interesting journey.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked about how keto affects athletes, busted that water weight myth, even tackled the dreaded keto flu. But now it's all about you, our listener. You've heard it all, the good and the bad. So what do you think? Is keto right for you?
That's the big question, isn't it? And like we've been saying, there's no single answer. Everyone's different. Their bodies, their goals, how they live their lives.
Exactly. What works for one person might not work for another. It really comes down to your individual needs, what you want to achieve, and if keto fits into your lifestyle.
Okay, so let's say you're curious about keto, you're thinking about it, but you're not sure. What are some things to really consider before you jump in?
I think the first thing is to be honest with yourself about why you want to try keto. What are you hoping to get out of it? Is it weight loss, more energy, better control of your blood sugar, or something else completely?
Because let's be real, if you just want to fit into those smaller jeans, there might be easier ways to do it, right?
Yeah.
Keto is a pretty big commitment.
Definitely. It's a restrictive diet, so you got to have a good reason, something strong enough to get you through the tough parts. And speaking of tough parts, don't forget the social side of things. We humans are social creatures, and food is a big part of how we connect with others.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's hard to stick to any diet when you're surrounded by temptation. Imagine trying to resist cake at a birthday party or a pizza night with your friends.
Exactly. Those situations can be real roadblocks for anyone doing keto. So think about how you'd handle those and if you have people who support you.
Because feeling like you're missing out or deprived, that can really mess things up, even if you're super motivated.
No doubt about it. You got to find a way to make keto fit into your life so it's sustainable and enjoyable. And that brings us to the food itself. Keto sometimes gets a bad rep for being, like, boring and tasteless.
But does it have to be that way? I've seen some pretty creative keto recipes online. They don't look boring at all.
Not at all. There's a ton of delicious and interesting keto recipes out there. It just takes a little digging to find them and try them out. You could even make it a social thing.
Now, that's a great idea. Start a keto cooking club with friends or something.
Exactly. Doing it together can make it more fun and less overwhelming. So, okay, let's say you've thought it through, you're motivated, you got your support system, and you're ready to go. What's the best way to start with keto?
Do you just, go cold turkey and throw out all the carbs in your kitchen?
I wouldn't recommend that. A slower approach is probably better. Don't try to change everything at once.
Ease into it, like dipping your toes in the water before you jump in.
Exactly. Start by slowly cutting back on your carbs and really pay attention to how your body feels. Listen to those signals, physical and mental.
And if you start feeling any bad side effects, don't hesitate to talk to a doctor.
Absolutely. Better safe than sorry, especially when it comes to your health. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember about keto? The big takeaway.
I'm curious to hear it.
I think the most important thing is to remember that keto is a tool. It's not a magic solution. It's not going to fix everything for everyone. And it's not a quick fix either.
It's about knowing your body, making smart choices, and finding what really works for you.
Exactly. And remember, being healthy and feeling good, it's a journey. It's about keep learning, adapting, and making choices that help you reach your goals.
Well said. We've given you a lot to think about today. Now it's time for you to continue exploring the world of keto on your own. Do your research, ask questions, and most importantly, listen to your body. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.